Okay, so I'll start.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Will I start?
Yep.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'll just be giving a whistle-stop tour of the Burren Pine and how sort of the whole project came about. Was my initial was to do with these articles here that are mentioned here by the two authors in this. The two authors in this paper, and actually was actually delayed. Jenny Roach is there on the top. She was the primary person in the paper I would have initially heard about, but also the late Michael Viney wrote an article in the Irish Times, and it was from that I investigated further and eventually tracked down to where these pines were up in the Burren, and I then subsequently got permission from the national parks because to get a license to collect these seeds. In addition, I got the site registered as a seed stand for future collection, along with the owners and so on. So those seeds can be those trees that are grown from those seeds and collected in the Burren can be used in native woodland schemes because you're supposed to have certificate of provenance and so on. But as I said, it was the work of other people such as Jenny Roach that led to this. That these pines were growing up here, this small little population that could be, I don't know, roughly about 50 pines up there. And why is it called the Burren pine? And we sort of adopted that name to distinguish from the Scots pine because neither of those obviously are the proper name. Pinus sylvestris is the official name, Latin name, which would be recognised all across the world, not just in Ireland. You would go to China and somebody, if you say Pinus sylvestris, they'll know what tree you're talking about. You say Scots pine, Burren pine, whatever pine you might like to call it, they won't know necessarily what you're talking about. So in the case of Scots pine, they, as you can see, were reintroduced in the 17th century from Scotland, so they adopted that name. The original Scots died out for various reasons, climate being one of them. Also, probably people may have cut them down. I'd say probably most likely climate change because a lot of blanket bogs created was a lot of them growing in them boglands before there were blanket bogs, and basically smothered pine, as some of you may be aware of seeing stumps in cutaway bogs where you've actually got pine stumps, often mistaken to as being called bog oak, but actually a lot of it is actually Scots pine. So unlike other parts of Ireland, there was a continuous layer of the Pinus sylvestris pollen found up in the cores taken from the mud in shallow lakes around Rock Forest. There are several lakes around there. And it was that work that Jenny Roach was involved in, mainly, which was there was other people too that would have come up with this theory down the years. But they haven't found that anywhere else in the country. It was just up that there was a continuous layer. The continuous layer of pollen just dropped off in other parts. But so far, Rock Forest was the only place up in the Burren that shows this continued there, implying that there was a continuous population of Scots pine in the area. Why might it be there? Because the place itself is very isolated. It's difficult terrain. Probably unlikely that anybody would have been able to get in there easily. Either there wouldn't be people in there in the first place, and then to get the timber out was going to be very difficult. Also, there was the Rock Forest estate, which also lended a bit of help. So, the people might have got the timber around the edges, but when it came to getting in there, it wasn't going to be as easy to get the timber out under the eye of the landlord or whoever it was at the time. So in order to grow those pines, to collect them, I need every year I apply for a permit to collect cones off the national parks. In addition, I get a stand registry. I get a collection permit from the Forest Service, so they would be registered. Subsequently, you can issue certificates of provenance to show they came from there. As you can see, the landscape up here is extreme in many different ways. First of all, you have very shallow soils, there are little or no soils. And you go from, at this time of the year, flooding, where you can go up there and the trees can be in a metre of water, to, in the drought, like the most recent drought that we had, long-term drought, was in 2018. And yet they're able to survive all those different situations, which sort of goes contrary to a lot of things, because generally said trees won't grow in wet water, it won't survive. But it's probably to do with the limestone that they're able to survive. But they don't grow very quick up there. I think the estimate is around 150 years old. Some of these trees are on cores on dead trees. They didn't touch the living ones. There's many standing trees up there. So then how we go about this is collecting cones. It's very irregular. It's part of nature's survival mechanism. Some years you'll have good crops, other years you won't. You know, the difficulty is also getting the cones. Cones are not necessarily open at one time, even in you know, in controlled condition, never mind in the tree. So it can take 2 years to get some of the seeds out of them. And that again is an adaptation to survive. So there's bad years or whatever. There's a constant trickle of seeds falling on the ground in its natural climate, natural habitat, I should say. Then these are just some snapshots of the young and the old, as I say, up in the Burren. You got one little one there at the top. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not. It's covered. You know, it's doing pretty well. But down here in the bottom, then the left-hand side, you got ones that's actually netting up. Big problem up here is goats grazing. The trees are actually regenerating. There's plenty of trees around, pine trees, but a lot have been grazed by goats and maybe horses. And then there's like a tree there to the right that's standing, looks rotten, but I can tell you it's not a budgeon. It's solid as a rock. There's many more years like that. So that in itself is, as most people know, is a very important habitat, particularly for bats and also roosting birds that might want to stand to look for mice or whatever. Now getting near to what a lot of people were, how to plant these and how do we come about them. So in the nursery, you got year one there. On the left-hand side there, trays, they're only a few, maybe 2 months old. Then you got year two there in the middle, and then year three, the bigger ones. So that's just quick. The seeds, we sow them in the spring, whatever we can get. Some years we get nothing, so it's hit and miss. They're easy enough to germinate. The main problem is getting the seeds, and then you just grow them on and mind them. So the pines, well, just so you have some idea about the pines will grow to about 35 meters tall. Can live up to 200 years. As I said, they're the oldest known tree in the UK is about 400 years old. In the trade, that's timber trade, it would be known as red deal. There's white deal, which is spruce, but red deal was the pine. An important tree species for the red squirrel, and of course that's not by accident. As we know, red squirrel is native, and they would obviously survive them. Now, red squirrels are adapted to survive in spruce and so on. Where I live up here in Mount Shannon, there's lots of spruce, and we see red squirrel around. So, and there's also broadleaves, but not enough to sustain a population. They're light demanding species. That means they need light to grow. If you put them in the shade, they will slowly die away. Whereas something like a beech tree can tolerate the shade. You can plant it and it'll sit there and wait till another tree falls down or something, or an opening in the canopy, and will take off. Not the case with the pine. So generally the site then, basically any soil type. And for most people, it doesn't really matter because you're going to plant them in your corner. The most important factor is with nearly any plant, even trees that we perceive as like in wet ground, it's drainage, and particularly free draining in the case of Scots pine. If it is poor, you might want to consider drainage of some form. But then, you know, as we go through, things are changing, and a lot of things, maybe some of these places, maybe they're more suitable for putting in a pond. But I'm sure Lee and the staff there will already maybe have looked at your sites and assessed them for that, whether you're better off with a pond rather than putting trees in. So these are situations. I'm just going to give an overview of what happens more mainstream forestry, but some people might want to consider it. Generally, you're going to be going for no site preparation. The next alternative is where one of them is mounding with a drain. So that's where you put a drain in, a shallow drain, and the advantage of that is you create this sort of sandwich effect that you can see there in some of the pictures there at the top. You get this double layer of fertile soil, and you get a raised planting position, and you have the position of where the trees are going. So you know where to put them. And equally, it's very useful when it comes back to weed clearing, which I'll talk about later in the summer, because the trees are slightly elevated and they're easier to mind. But for most people, you won't be doing it in such a small area unless you have access to a digger. You're not going to bring it in. The other one then is, which is probably more widespread now, particularly with native woodland planting throughout the country, is what's called inverted mound. You just basically turn the sod upside down, so you get the top soil. The sod is in the bottom, and the tree is stuck into it. It just breaks up on your hard pan or so, and makes it again easier for planting. So as soon as the trees shouldn't really weigh around, because the best will in the world, we'll all like putting the long finger. The next thing something happens and you forget about them. That's one good reason. But the other reason is the longer you probably leave them around, the more likely they are going to deteriorate. They will tolerate a lot of things. Again, store the bags and trees in a cool, dark place. That's the bag trees. But the ones out, the potted ones that I would be mainly supplying, which is Scots, that's what I'm supplying. They can just be left outside, standing upright in any spot this time of the year. I just draw your attention there to the picture on the right there. You can see I've had sometimes people come back to me and say there's something wrong and the trees are all white. Well, actually, it's the complete opposite. That's exactly what you want. That's mycelium. The natural mycelium that I was only found out reason how they come about, but apparently when the cones are forming, the spores from mycelium get into the cones, so they're pre-inoculated with this natural mycelium. So that mycelium is effectively mycelium that would have come from more than likely the burren. And that helps the trees grow, makes them take up nutrients and fight off disease and so on. Mycelium is essential in all trees, but we don't really know about. It's not taught about. You think you just planted in, but all forests have mycelium, and this is what some people may have heard the wood wide web, where the roots and mycelium are all networking with one another, exchanging nutrients and so on. Mycelium is important for like taking up phosphorus, so the plants necessarily increases the surface area of the roots. So there's a symbiotic relationship. The plants might get phosphorus, let's say that the mycelium can get out of the ground, whereas then the mycelium is getting sugars from the roots of the plants. So it's a very much symbiotic relationship. So the plants, the actual Scots pine again could vary in size, probably less likely this year now, the one on the left, more like the ones there, them two in the middle that you can see. Just depends on whether I can get. Some years you get, as I said, a lot of cones, and others you don't. Now, the planting of it then, that some people might get wrong. It's not rocket science, but there's a few basic things. Don't plant too deep. You don't ever. This has been a worldwide problem for lots of people, and professions have done, so-called professions done wrong, where they planted trees too deep and killed it. There's a very distinct zone between the root, which is what's called, there you can see the root collar, basically is the slight little swelling, and the actual the stem. And if you put it too deep, you can cause the stem to rot. It'll be easy enough now with the pine, because you've got the surface of the pot there in the middle picture. You can just see it. That effectively is flush with the top of the soil. You can just dig a hole, fairly adequate, not too small. For in this case, I'm going to cover bare roots now in a separate slide. Just the collar, just as I said, below the root collar. And the spacing is 3 point by 3. I'm not sure, Lee may have changed that now, but I understand it's 3.3. And you just firm the ground around it, so that if you were just to pick the tip of the tree, you should be just able to get a tug, and it shouldn't come out, shouldn't be loose. You might want to check it during the course of after a few months or so, because particularly where you are, if it's windy, it may be a little bit rock. This applies to all trees, but a lot of trees you're getting aren't that big, and they shouldn't be. And most trees under 1 meter shouldn't need a support. You don't really generally need it. So when you get into the bigger trees, you need. The next slide now should deal with the bare root one and the technique there. So the technique is what's called a T-notch planting. There's another way, it's slip planting, but I would prefer the T-notch. So the first thing it's literally like a T. You can see the first picture on the left-hand side there. The middle one, that's completing the T. Then you just raise it up there in the third slide, and you just drop the tree just there where my hand is, and you just press it down and sort of push the step down and just firm it, and that's your tree planted. It's probably better than slip planting, which can cause what's called J-rooting. And it's quick and easy, not rocket science. That's particularly suitable now for the bare root trees that you might have. One important thing is, for nearly all of us, is fencing. Whether it's fencing for deer, cattle, sheep, horses, you'll have to, more often than not, you'll have to do fencing, because all your work can be just undone in a few days of animals getting in, because they're just going to go and chomp the trees. Alternative might be to put tubes in. If you're in deer, you're going to need deer fence. No, I wouldn't say deer fencing, because it's going to be too expensive for these small areas. You're better off getting tubes. And you're talking about a tube there in a deer fence, you're talking about 1.3, at least 1.3, up to 1.8 tube if you think you got red deer in your area. For sheep, obviously most people know for cattle you need 3 strands of barbed wire, and then if you've got sheep you need sheep wire. Hares are another issue. You can buy tubes, you can put chicken wire around them, but it needs to be around 0.7 meters high because they will chomp the trees off. How you know if a deer generally looks out at a lot of people, particularly if they're in a public area, they think somebody's come out with a secateurs and cut the trees. They will literally chop the trees and the bits will be on the ground. That's generally a very distinct sign of hair damage. When it comes to the other animals such as rabbits, hares again can do this. It can do a bit of paring at the bark and the top, the two pictures on the right hand side. That can be deer, depending on the size of the tree. And then this little chap at the bottom and a bankfall. They're invasive. They once you get your eye on them, they're quite distinct. They're stumpier than mice, and they got a distinct sort of that red sort of or ginger sort of patch on top of their head. And they will do damage such as in the top picture. They will actually climb trees to a certain point too, it depends, and they will ring bark the whole tree and it will die. And that can actually be a bigger problem when you think the trees could be 6 foot tall and you think they're up and going, and then you start seeing them going yellow and wonder what's happening if you have a lot of these around. These are mainly down on the western seaboard. They're spreading up. They started out around the Shannon Estuary and they've spread up the whole way along up, and they are up in as far as Mayo now. They've been found, and they are rodents, so they'll breed quite quickly if there's none to predate on them. So maintenance then of your site, you need to grass clean. There's no point. You're going to have to do some element of cleaning around the tree. You don't need to go out spraying, and grass cleaning is just pulling the grass away from the tree. One point there, where we're just showing other slides there, some people have done, which is a good idea, because when you plant it, obviously you think you'll find a tree, but if you don't get out there in time, let's say in June, you're going to have grass and you're going to be looking for your tree because they're small enough. So you should actually maybe consider putting some form of a cane beside your tree when you're planting it. Then when you go out, you'll know exactly where the tree is. It's very important to grass clean because as I said, the small ones will get smothered very quickly and will be dead very quickly. Once they get bigger, it's not as big an issue. As I say, don't really cut the vegetation with trimmers because you're either going to get the tree. It's impossible. Nearly everybody hits the tree and ring barks it, and also stimulates the growth. Don't put line clippings around the trees. Again, it causes anaerobic conditions, and it can also take the nitrogen out of the ground because you got bacteria trying to break it down. And it just ends up being gunk. It's not a good idea. It might look like, but it's not great. Also, you'll have this rotten grass beside the stem, which isn't good. It's anaerobic. And you could consider mulching, such as bark mulch or cardboard, as we'll see in other pictures. Particularly in the first year, you will need to come back in again, possibly in the autumn, and grass clean. This will depend on the site. Some sites have very big as grass grows, others won't. And again, late spring, you want to check. You want to check that the trees haven't died and to replace them if possible. And just keep checking and just making sure that the animals haven't got in, because if you do have a situation, particularly with oak, some trees will recover. Oak is very good at recovering if it gets hit by trees. Birch less so. I think hazel obviously will come back. A copse and Scots pine, it will come back, but it's not too badly. It won't look too nice at the beginning, but it is possible to get back. So some in the hawthorn will come back. So it's not the end of the world. But obviously it's better not to let it happen in the first place. So I've just now got some pictures that Lee shared with me there of sites. Bit hard to see there in the left picture now, it didn't come out that well, but there actually are canes there. Scattered outside, which is a very good idea, because if you look at the picture, you can't even see the trees, but the person that has that side obviously knows, so they can go straight out and not wander around. And this is an example of what looks like an alder here, with all the grass around. It's not from the same site, but it's a very good example of why it was a good idea to put a cane in. You can see the tree straight away. Then we come to mulching. So you have somebody use newspaper, quite good. Don't know about the frame, but again, whatever, it's no harm in it. And the cardboard. Circular cardboard doesn't need to be that big. I think if you have it like a half a meter around it, either side, so 1 meter wide should be more than enough. And then somebody here, as you see, use this sort of, use the grass clippings, as not a good idea at all. You're better off not doing it. So then you have a situation where, some people just, they put them too close, and, the trees are going to outcompete one another, and only one or two of those trees are going to survive. And they're rare enough, so, you'd rather just space them out well. Another thing is there not to plant the pine so much too close to the hedgerow, because that's the tree you're trying to grow on ultimately, and the oak. And if they're in under a hedgerow, I don't know whether I've got that picture. I'll just check here. No, I don't. I just saw one where there was a birch tree and a few trees around it, so it's already going to be competing. So you need to leave them out closer to the edges, not too close to the edge, because you're going to have maybe some of the hazel and so on. But if you have a hedgerow already, and you need to keep away from it, because it's going to shade out most of the trees. Then the threats, we've mentioned the threats, the deer, the cattle, sheep. Obviously I said the red squirrel there, but red squirrel can cause bark damage too, but generally it's the grey squirrel that causes damage to a lot of the trees. And thankfully, as a lot of people might know at this stage, where you have pine marten, you basically the grey squirrel is disappearing. It's nearly proven now. Lots of people are seeing that. And of course they're both native to the country, so they've adapted. The reason the red squirrel is he's lighter and is able to get away from them, whereas the grey squirrel isn't. One of the reasons anyway that they are able to coexist together. Then diseases then, which you can't do much about. You're going to get, you may see it. There's lots of diseases coming in. The one there called red band needle blight, nematodes and cankers and so on. But just to say, this is lots of trees. You might see the needles fall off. Generally speaking, the needles will fall off, but they'll recover the following spring. But what you'll end up is with a bare tree, because they never get the needles. It's not like broadleaves where the leaves will just come back. Once the needles are lost to a certain extent, you end up with a ball, but the actual tree itself will grow on. So that's mainly the threats there, I think. So that's it. Thank you for your time, and I'll take questions if there's any.
Great. Thanks so much, Bernard. That was great. Now, yeah, we've already had some comments there. Very good and informative. And will we get this PowerPoint? Yeah, so I'll send it out as a link. We're recording this session, so you can watch it on YouTube and pause it when you get to a slide that you particularly want the information from. Bernard, just a question while we're waiting. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please pop them in the chat. We do have two here. Is sheep fleece good as a weed suppressant / mulch?
Yeah, that seems to be a very popular one now, because lots of people hadn't got used. Yes, it is. It seems to be widely used. It's unfortunate that's another debate, but that's what we're using sheep wool for. I think it's way more valuable than that. But certainly, if you have it, use it. Yeah, it's natural. It's got the dung in it and all. So yeah, absolutely. It's been, lots of people have used it and found it very useful, successful.
Very good. Hello, are we going to have a copy of the presentation? Yep, we'll be sending out the link. 3x3 spacing for Scots pine, 1.5 for others. Does this mean one of the others can be planted 1.5 meter space for a pine? So in between, I imagine you're asking.
Yeah, doing around. I just meant to check with you, Lee, to see what you might have discussed, because that's what we were talking about the last time, whether you've changed that. The main thing here is we're trying to grow the Scots pine, and the oak could be another one. The other trees are just initial species, like the pioneer type species. Did you say there was birch included in this, Lee? Are you hunting out birch?
Birch. The others, yeah, hawthorn, hazel, holly, spindle. So those.
So they're the understory. They will eventually, in the natural system, there'll be less of them, and the oak takes over and the pine takes over, and they coexist together. So you're only just filling them in just to fill the space up in the meantime, sort of,
Yeah. So previously, I started with the Hare's Corner at the end of phase 2. But I think for phase 1, they had kind of had a Hare's Corner method of planting, in which it was kind of nice and neat. But people also did whatever they wanted, and dispersed them randomly in whatever space they had. The thing that we do want you to note is that we will be carrying out random assessments to see if they're surviving or not. So the bamboo stakes, that was brilliant to be able to find the trees. Sometimes site, you cannot see, like you said, if you don't go out in June and trample down the grass around it, or have some tape or a cane or something to remind you of where you've planted them, they can easily get lost. The picture you showed, that meadow sweet was like 6 feet tall, so there was no
Yeah.
way without those bamboo canes that we would have found the trees. So just keeping that in mind, that if we do an assessment, if you received 50 trees, we'll want to find all 50, whether they survived or died. So if that means planting them in, in a space in a nice straight line, or just marking them somehow, that would be great for us.
Yeah, you can't underestimate the power of weeds. Well, weeds to us because they're just in the wrong place. But anybody that grows a veg garden knows it looks lovely when you till it and it's all pretty, and then like suddenly 5 weeks later, where's everything gone under the weeds? So yeah, that was what I asked you about. Your Danny slides. So that was I wouldn't have thought that, because I would normally be in commercial forestry and we would have the mounds and everything's in line. So, you go down the line and you know where the next tree is, you get, but when people might be planting them. So the canes probably is one of the better things. Very good idea for everybody, particularly if you don't get out in time, you at least know I'll go over there and going to find a tree somewhere. It should be there,
Yeah, because even the marker tape, that could get overgrown.
Oh, that would get buried. Yeah, no, the canes are the best. And only, it doesn't have to be bog cane. And I don't know, it could be hazel stick or whatever you can find of those. If people are, well, they might have 50 of them to spare to fencing things that probably don't be a bit expensive. You can still use them. But it's mainly the first year is going to be well, maybe into the second year, depends on just the plant. Really, the first 2 years are, critical. And if after that the grasses fall down, you probably can, reclaim them or get them back. But if they're gone in the first year or so, they'll probably be smothered because they just rot very quickly underneath the grass and everything. So it's very important to keep on top of the grass cleaning.
Yes. We have another question. Hi, how close to houses and electrical poles / lines should we plant?
Right. Well, the rules pertaining to houses is 30 meters. That's the official sort of, if I was planting a commercial site. And the 60 meters if somebody doesn't want it. That's known. So 30 meters generally. ESB, that again, these are all just rules of thumb. 20 meters, if it's a low tension line, you just leave. While low tension line is basically if there's a transformer, which is like a cylinder type thing attached to the pole, and then the line goes into the house. That's just basically you wouldn't plant underneath, you stay 2 meters either side. But if it was a big line, could be 20 meters, it could be anything. What will happen is if you do plant underneath it is at some point the ESP will come out and cut everything, because they're going to keep the line clear and they'll determine then what they need. So you might think you're getting away with it, but you might just come home someday and find all your trees cut if you don't keep the right corridor. But for a line going from a transformer into a domestic house, it's generally just keep 2-3 meters underneath the line. That's it's not, there's no official you could plant it. That's generally the guide.
Yeah. Do we mix the trees when planting, or are each type planted separately?
I would mix. As I say, I think you said it, Lee, there. I think people should just, this isn't a commercial thing. I think groups are better. You're better off planting a few trees together, not together as in nearly together, but 3 meters apart. So 3 pine together, 4 pine together, and then something else. That's the way I would do it. And then your smaller trees, your birch, your alder, your hawthorn out around the edges, because they will live on, the hazel. So that's what I would do. As I say, nature doesn't exactly have a textbook how to do it. So you're just, if you wanted, you could just throw them in the air and see where to land. But I don't think I'd do that. The natural system. So I wouldn't get worked up about that. It's not a commercial plantation, and it'll grow away. Just as I go back to, you need to plant them right and mind them. The more important and keep the distance, because they'll just smother one another. And that's more important than whether you should mix them or not. I think whatever you like yourself, sort of.
That image that we saw where they were planted together, that was an assessment I did from phase 2. So they would have planted those last January. How much time do they have? Like, how many years? Hopefully they won't wait, but if you plant and you want to move your trees, how much time do you have?
Yeah. They can move them anytime now. And in a commercial sort of operation, a tree that's planted into the ground, they say 9 years. But by God, you'll have some job. You need a sharp spade and strong muscles to dig it up. And if that is the case, you can move it 9 years. This came up before, actually, people wonder about, and that could be another option too for people. A nice little nursery. You could bring these trees elsewhere around your farm. 9 years is generally speaking, but you need the most important thing is that you take a good root ball with them and don't break it up too much when you're transplanting them to another site. And then, well, we did have this problem this year. Actually, it turns out people have forgotten probably that June was a heat wave, and we had a severe drought in June, believe it or not. So watering will be critical to moving a bigger tree at a later stage. If somebody said, I don't want to lose all those trees and have another place in their farm or their whatever, their land to plant them, up to 9 years, take plenty of as big a root ball as you can, and make sure you water in dry weather.
Very good. Is it a good idea to trim/clear the area we will be planting in?
Yeah, that's no harm. The biggest problem you have is the older sites that haven't been used. As you've all rank grass, we call it big, and you're trying to get the spade down. Now you don't want to plant too many, so it's not too bad. But if you can trim it, yeah, absolutely, before you plant. But don't go in with a trimmer after you plant. No matter how good you are, you're going to end up bringing back, and you won't even know it. I've just seen it countless times. No, don't go near it, and you don't need. Well, as we said, you don't need spray. So absolutely, yeah, if you can clean it off, it's going to be a lot easier to plant and to mind. Particularly if you've got rushes, because they're just going to be waiting to get going. They're evergreen. They're just waiting for the temperatures, and they'll take over as soon as a bit of heat suddenly be that one of those pictures you showed. Look at them, people with canes in so they could see them. So absolutely, if you can clear it beforehand, yes.
Nice question. Is there any suggestion how to arrange when planting, specifically because of heights? Yeah, I think you touched on that a little bit, the kind of the hedgerow.
Yeah, you could get into this, but these are small plots. Just keep your groups together again. I think, go for groups of Scots pine, groups of oak, and just guard them around. But don't get worked up. Just keep the distances. It's only 0.1 of a hectare, so it's probably 100 odd trees for some people. Max, I guess. So what's the most you're giving to anybody, Lee?
Yeah, less than 100. Well, for this year.
Yeah, so there's no need to. It's not. In forestry world, it's a different sort of thing. But yeah, just mind them.
Yeah, and the image that you shared, that page with the tea planting, that was great to show. We didn't have those images before, so that's good.
Yeah, I only thought that because I was focused. I realized, I didn't put that one because if somebody see the slides are similar, it's hard to reinvent it. But that was when I realized that hold on, people have got bare root, and there is another way of doing that. It's called a slot. It's not a full tea, and I don't think this is good. It's better to do that tea because you break the ground up a bit. Than the other way, which is just stick the spade in and you put the plant in behind, you walk and the roots are all squashed together. So the tea is a better way, in my opinion, of planting bare root trees.
Yeah. And then the follow-up from the last question, do all trees need to be planted together, or can I kind of spread it a bit? And I think, that's again, just so we can find them again, if we're going to do an assessment. But yeah, you can, I would, if you have your front garden, you want to put some in your back garden, and over on this field, it's fine.
Oh yeah, but that's a different story. Because I'm thinking of one plot, but that may not be the case. That's up to whatever you agree with, Lee. I don't know what your arrangements are. Just I just thought it was one plot, but obviously it may not be. But you have to. I don't know what the terms and conditions are.
We do have some small holdings. Some people would have a lot of space, and they would have maybe half of their trees would kind of go in this corner of the field and the other half in that corner of the field, or even connecting, the linear connecting. So, we don't have any specific rules on how they all have to be together per se, but just so we could find them really, to assess their survival rate.
I don't know why you were just saying there. I mean, I didn't say it earlier on the slides. It's not quite related to what you're saying, but just come up in my head there now about the importance of this project in preserving the pine. Because there's a place in Australia, the Willomi pine. They're basically called a dinosaur pine. And I was looking up to get one or two of them. They were growing in botanics in Kew Garden, and they distributed around the world. But they were only found, I don't know, roughly 20 years ago in Australia. in a valley. Something it always reminds me of up in Rock Forest, something similar. And they were the only one. They were the only record of them prior to that was in the fossil records, and they basically rediscovered this tree that thought was extinct for hundreds of years. Sorry, millions of years. And yeah, so where is it going with this? Basically, recently, about a couple of years ago, they had to. The only few people know where these are because they don't want people going into them. There was a fire, and they had to bring in fire hoses and everything. I don't even know how to done it to try and protect them because they're nearly burnt. And if these pines are what they're supposed to be, unique to Ireland, that's their only population. So this project is allowing for those to be redistributed, busy little mini arboretums for those Scots pine all around Ireland. So it's a pretty, I should have said it earlier on, it's very important. So everybody that has these pines, that's what you're doing. You're storage for the genetics of those pines from the Burren, that if something, God forbid, did happen, and where the climate's going, you don't know what could happen. Like fires do occur in the Burren, and occur in places you never think could happen. If it, God forbid, a fire, or a disease, at least we have all these other populations scattered around the country, rather than just relying on one.
Yeah, that's a good point you make, is touching on if people are planting near where they currently have a stand of Scots pine, is there a possibility of then hybrid?
Yeah,
we're
they will
stay away from
and
it.
I don't know the exact this, but I'd imagine pollen will travel miles because it's just dust to our eyes. So if you have, but that doesn't mean you can't do it, I wouldn't get worked up. But from my point of view, if I was collecting cones off them, you couldn't quite say they're original Burren pine. Because up in the Burren, there's no other pine around. Although there is a area that some say on the edge of that plantation that may have been introduced they may have been planted at a later stage. But the ones that are in the area I collect in are there for, well, who knows, thousands of years, that population. But yes, absolutely, if you've got other Scots pine around, they're going to cross-pollinate and it won't be pure. But again, I wouldn't get worried about that. It's about planting trees, and it's just nice that you can also do a little bit for genetic conservation of the species. It's not, you don't want to get worked up about cross-pollination and all that. But that, certainly, if I was going out and somebody said, I've got cones in the future, let's say, we could be talking about 10, 15 years time, some of the trees might produce cones. You probably wouldn't want to, because they're probably not pure. It's called Burren pine, that's what we call it.
And we just have one more question about the oak species. They're asking if it should be a 3 meter minimum instead of the 1.5, because the oak are
apart. Yeah, well, I probably would put the oak further apart. Yeah, I probably haven't just cited. I don't know whether you changed that, but in normal forestry, it'd be even closer. But that's a different thing. So in this case, 3 meters. I'd keep the bigger trees, your oak, your pine. I think they were the main ones. The others I wouldn't worry about as much. Keep them at 3 meters apart, because they're the trees that are going to last. As we know, oak can live for easily 500 years. So you want them to grow, whereas the holly and all those are all short-lived, 100 years type lifespan. So the pine and the oak are going to be the main trees that are going to be there. We're all long gone.
Yeah, and the prize tree really is the Burren pine here. So please take great care when you receive your trees. We've planted. We also, at the Burren Bio, we've done the Burren Pine Project and the Hare's Corner, and I believe you said NPWS has collected some, but thousands since, just in the Hare's Corner project, after this round, we'll have planted well over 4,000 Burren pine trees. So I think that's a success.
And this is probably, dare I say, it's almost more successful than, you probably don't know about this, Lee, but we had a thing 2000 called the Millennium Forest Project, where there was an oak tree planted for everybody in the country. But it didn't quite work out that in reality. The thing is, because these plots are so small, a lot of these pines are going to be around in 100 years' time. They're going to be there. It won't be, because in a commercial situation, the trees, they're thinned out to die, and so on. But because these trees plots are so small, they should be still here in 100 years' time. Whereas if you planted the same amount of trees in a commercial, you said we planted 4,000 trees in what would that be? Just 2 hectares, 3 hectare site. But within 50 years, most of those trees will be gone to be 50, 60 years, most of them will be gone to be thinned out and whatnot. But because these are individual, most of these trees are going to grow to the sort of iconic image we have of, you know, the one up in Connemara of the pine trees. That's the beauty of this project, that these trees will last. And because there's some people cut them down and all these sort of things, but not everybody. So the smaller the plots, the more plots we have, the more these trees will be around to reach maturity. Yeah.
Yeah, and it'll, for our kids and grandkids, they'll be the ones who
Yeah.
really get to enjoy it. But you know, that was done for us, so it's really great to be able to carry all this forward. And Bernard, thank you so much for all your hard work with your the seed collection and you know, bringing them, helping them along on every stage, and then dispersing them to our lovely Hare's Corner participants. So
Yeah. So,
yeah, that's all the questions we have for tonight. But I look forward to seeing you all at Handout Day. And yeah, stay warm. And thanks for joining us tonight. And
yeah.
thank
Good
you
night. Thank
for
you.
some nice questions here. Very informative, fascinating. Thank you so much. So some nice comments there for you, Bernard. But
Thank
thanks
you.
again.
Thanks very much.
Have a great night.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Bye now.